Before there were spaceships, robots, or time machines, before Hollywood gave us alien invasions and artificial intelligence, there was a young woman, just 19 years old, who imagined a scientist bringing the dead back to life. And in doing so, Mary Shelley didn't just write a horror story, she gave birth to science fiction. But more importantly, she gave us a warning, one that feels especially urgent in modern America, where innovation moves faster than regulation and discovery often outruns reflection. Tonight, we're not just talking about Frankenstein as a novel, we're talking about how it became the foundation of every ethical debate about science that we're still having today. Part 1. The Revolutionary Idea. Published in 1818, Frankenstein, or the Modern Prometheus, emerged during a time of dramatic scientific change. Electricity was being studied as a mysterious, almost divine force. Experiments in galvanism suggested that electrical currents could make dead tissue twitch. For the first time in human history, people began to imagine that life itself might be mechanistic, something that could be studied, manipulated, even recreated. Mary Shelley took that scientific curiosity and asked a radical question. If we unlock the secret of life, what happens next? Victor Frankenstein is not portrayed as a villain in the beginning. He is intelligent, ambitious, and driven. He embodies the spirit of discovery that would later define industrialized nations like the United States, a belief that knowledge is power and that progress is inherently good. He studies tirelessly. He isolates himself in pursuit of a breakthrough, and eventually he succeeds. He creates life. This is the moment that makes Frankenstein the first true work of science fiction. The creation of the creature is not attributed to magic or divine intervention. It is the result of experimentation, inquiry, and scientific ambition. But Shelley doesn't linger on the triumph. Instead, she shifts the focus immediately to something far more unsettling: responsibility. Part 2. The real horror. When the creature opens its eyes, Victor is horrified, not by what he has done, but by what he sees. The being he imagined as beautiful and powerful appears grotesque to him. Overwhelmed, Victor abandons his creation. And that abandonment is the true catalyst of tragedy. The creature is not born violent. In fact, he begins as curious, sensitive, and deeply human in his desire for connection. He learns language. He observes families. He longs for companionship and kindness. But he is rejected at every turn. The world sees his appearance before it sees his humanity. And eventually, the isolation turns into rage. Shelley's message is subtle but powerful. The monster is not inherently monstrous. He becomes monstrous because he is denied empathy. This is where Frankenstein transcends horror and becomes a meditation on ethics. Victor's failure is not that he created life. His failure is that he refused to take responsibility for it. Part 3. The Modern Prometheus. The subtitle of the novel, The Modern Prometheus, is crucial. In Greek mythology, Prometheus steals fire from the gods and gives it to humanity, a symbol of knowledge, power, and advancement. But that gift comes with punishment. Shelley frames Victor as a modern version of this mythic figure. He steals the fire of life itself. But unlike Prometheus, who suffers for helping humanity, Victor's suffering stems from his refusal to nurture what he has created. And this is where the novel becomes astonishingly modern. In the United States today, we lead the world in technological innovation. Artificial intelligence is reshaping industries. Genetic editing tools like CRISPR allow scientists to alter DNA. Biotech firms are exploring synthetic organs. Engineers are building autonomous systems capable of making decisions once reserved for humans. The spirit of Victor Frankenstein, relentless innovation, bold experimentation, belief in progress, is embedded in American identity. But so is the central question of Shelley's novel.
What are our obligations to the things we create?
Part 4. Bioethics and America's Innovation Culture. Frankenstein can be read as the first bioethics case study in literature. Victor never pauses to ask, should I do this? What will this being need? How will society respond? What safeguards must exist? He asks only, can I? And that distinction between can and should defines every modern ethical debate about science in America. When tech companies release powerful AI systems, who ensures they are used responsibly? When biotech companies manipulate genetic code, who sets the boundaries? When innovation disrupts communities, who bears the consequences? Shelley's insight was not anti-science. She was not condemning discovery. Instead, she was arguing that knowledge without moral responsibility is dangerous. Progress is not the villain of Frankenstein. Neglect is. The tragedy unfolds not because Victor was brilliant, but because he was careless.
Part 5. Why it still matters. 200 years later, Frankenstein remains required reading not because it frightens us, but because it forces us to reflect. It reminds us that creation demands stewardship. Innovation requires accountability, and power without empathy can destroy both creator and creation. The novel also challenges the American myth that ambition alone guarantees greatness. Victor embodies the self-made genius archetype, but his downfall exposes the limits of individual brilliance when detached from community and responsibility. Shelley asks us to consider something deeply uncomfortable. What if the real danger isn't technological advancement, but emotional immaturity? What if our greatest threat isn't what we build, but our failure to care for it?
Mary Shelley was a teenager when she wrote Frankenstein. Yet she understood something that still defines our century. The future will be shaped not just by what we invent, but by how we choose to govern it. Science fiction was born not as escapism, but as ethical inquiry. And every time we debate AI regulation, genetic engineering, or biomedical experimentation, we are, in some way, returning to that candlelit room in 1816, where a young writer imagines a scientist who reached too far and refused to look back. The creature once said, "I ought to be thy Adam, but I am rather the fallen angel." That line captures the heart of the novel. Creation without compassion turns potential into tragedy. So as America continues to lead the world in innovation, perhaps the most important question isn't how far we can go. It's whether we're prepared to take responsibility for what we bring to life. Because the true legacy of Frankenstein isn't the monster stitched together in a lab. It's a mirror held up to every generation bold enough to create the future. If you want more in-depth explorations of the books that shaped our world and still define our debates, stay with us. The past has more to teach us than we think.